of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. It's Sunday. The snow is melting, finally. 42 inches of snow. It's starting to melt. And I am happy to be here with you today because we're going to be talking about a lot of things. We are live. This is a live stream with you, talking about the issues that matter. We're talking about whether or not there's going to be a martial law. We're talking about a $600 check that's coming out to you. We're going to be talking about what's going on with heroin overdoses in this nation, what's going on in West Palm Beach. We're going to be talking about a lot of information. But first, let me mention, if you have not been here before, no Soundbites Allowed. We do long-form political commentary on this program, and every Sunday, just like today, at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream where you are able to speak with us. You can reach us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and you can even call into the show at 607-242-1582, and you're able to speak with us directly about whatever matters to you. Now, I have a bunch of things I want to bring up, but you are you lead this conversation. You are the decision makers here, and we love you because of that. Now, for a lot of people, you may notice Facebook is probably down. For some reason, as of yesterday, when we were doing some breaking news about what's happening in West Palm Beach, which we're going to get into in a moment, Facebook completely blocked us. As far as we are aware, after over 10 years doing podcasts and putting out information and doing live streams on Facebook, we seem to be now blocked completely from that platform. We are sorry for those who follow us on Facebook, but go to YouTube, go to Twitter. We're going to keep broadcasting, and we will put this out once it's done. We'll have that finished video out for you if you are a Facebook watcher. And I see a few people are already connecting in. Hello, everybody. Please do type in. We're happy to hear from you. So let's start with this. What are we going to talk about today? Let's start off with, well, I think the thing that's probably one of the biggest issues that a lot of people are concerned about. They're starting to hear about this. It's a big rumor. I woke up this morning and found Twitter filled with this conversation. And a lot of people, I think, are very confused about it. According to Twitter, we know President Trump is named and as it's about martial law. President Trump is considering martial law. Matter of fact, if we go to CNN, according to CNN Politics, heated Oval Office meeting included talk of a special counsel martial law as Trump advisors clash. This is their article. This is the big news that was the welcoming message for everybody Sunday morning. President Trump is going to be putting in martial law. Oh my God, all the Democrats were right. This is it. Trump has overrun his boundaries. Except that's not exactly true. And the major news media expect you not to pay attention to the details, because the details make all the difference. Because what actually happened, if you read into it, if you pay attention to the details, it was General Flynn, who has been pardoned, suggested earlier this week that Trump could invoke martial law as part of his efforts to overturn the election that he lost due to Joe Biden. An idea that rose up in the meeting, some unnamed person said. Now, here's the first thing I want to mention about this. This entire thing that's sweeping Twitter, that is trending like crazy, martial law, there is no one that was actually in the room that we know of. Some 2 unnamed sources claim to have overheard this or be involved with this. Nobody knows that this is true. There is no source. And I know this because even CNN admits they're referring this entire article where they're claiming that martial law is being spoken about by Trump and his advisors. They're referring to the New York Times article on this. And in this meeting, it is clearly stated there are no named sources. 2 unnamed people, according to 2 people briefed on the discussion. So I want to be very clear about that. This entire article, this entire panic that's sweeping through Democrats all across the nation, progressives and liberals across the nation. The question is, it's according to two people briefed on the discussion. So by the New York Times admission itself, no one knows what actually happened in the meeting. It appears that their sources weren't even there. This is hearsay. This is hearsay on the same scale as when The Atlantic released an article saying that President Trump hated the troops, and 24 individuals came out and said, that's not true. That never happened. No such conversation ever existed. President Trump has never said that. Now, I don't care if you love or hate President Trump. It has nothing to do with that. Nothing whatsoever. You can love President Trump. You can hate President Trump. Doesn't matter. What does matter is you have the news media is inciting a panic, essentially, in a bunch of people. If you go by what's happening in Twitter and the reactions on Twitter, then they're inciting a panic over something that no one has any proof of. And they're changing the story as it goes along. It's like a game of telephone. Because even though we see that the New York Times reported on this, and then that story is changed by the time it gets over to CNN. And then it changes again once it gets onto Twitter. And then people on Twitter start making their own expansive Orange Man bad stories about this, claiming that, oh, we've been right all along. Trump's going to go crazy. He's never going to get out of office. There's no proof of any of this. And I really have a question with this, because let's look at who actually wrote this article. Maggie Haberman. Well, let's think about who is Maggie Haberman of the New York Times. Let's make sure we understand the sources that are providing us this unnamed, unverified information. She's part of the team that won the Pulitzer Prize in 2018 for reporting Donald Trump's advisors and their connections with Russia. Oh, I see. I get it. She's connected to Russiagate. She pushed the Russiagate story. Yeah, Maggie, it seems, was part of Russiagate. Now, when we were told about Russiagate, what were we told about Russiagate? Very simply, we were told over and over again that Donald Trump colluded with the Russians. We heard Adam Schiff, Representative Adam Schiff, say on national TV over and over again that there's absolute proof of this. And then after 3 investigations, over $30 million spent of your tax money, not one shred of proof was found. It didn't happen. Not once. Now, mind you, the news media, if we're talking about Rachel Maddow, we're talking about Maggie Haberman, New York Times, no one ever backed off and said, we're sorry that we lied to you for 3 years. We're sorry that we promoted a story that didn't exist. We're sorry that we completely falsified this information and detrimentally affected a president trying to do his job and the international relations he had. No, that's okay, because it was Orange Man bad, so it didn't matter. That's a big thing. So, when I see that she is the source of this story, and when she says in the very first paragraph that the people she's relying on for this information on this news story were briefed on the discussion, that they weren't in the discussion, you got to excuse me if I say, I don't believe it. I don't know that this is even real. Now, we do know, as CNN pointed out, that General Flynn mentioned this, but that has nothing to do with Donald Trump. That has nothing to do with the United States government. But this is where we're hearing this. And Twitter is filled with people screaming about martial law from 2 unnamed sources that weren't in the meeting. That is like saying, that is essentially the same as saying that, hey, guess what, guys? I walked down the street and someone told me that I don't know, that an elected official decided that dogs were no longer allowed in homes. It's completely conjecture. It's made up. There's no credibility. This may be an accurate story from the New York Times. This might be true that someone, not President Trump, someone in the room, according to the extended stories out there, someone in the room may have mentioned to President Trump that he theoretically has the power to claim martial law, partial martial law, by the way, if you actually read the story, if you read the news, that it's possible that he could claim that so that there could be another election actually held. But there's no confirmation of this. There is no proof of this. Maybe it happened. Maybe not. Apparently, it wasn't Trump saying that. It was other people telling Trump that he could do that. Now, does that make a difference? Yeah, it does. Now, according to, and I want to thank, hey, Greg, you're new on the channel. It's good to see you. Greg Weaver mentions that this is more fake news. And I have to tell you, you're right. It seems like it is. Because if there was any credibility to it, someone would have their name on this. If this was as devastating as the media wants us to believe, as Twitter wants us to believe, somebody would say, hey, I'm warning the American people that President Trump is about to enact martial law. This is an overreach of his power. This is potentially inappropriate. But that's not what's happening. It's not what's happening at all. It's very much like the Russia collusion story that Maggie Haberman helped push out there for 3-4 years, saying there's Russia collusion, except the only people we could find that actually did any collusion were the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton. Oh, but we can't talk about that. Don't worry about it. That's not the important part. The important part is that, President Trump was part of that. And again, let me say it again. It doesn't matter if you like or dislike President Trump, whether that's a personal basis or whether that's political basis or some specific bill or action he took. It doesn't matter. What does matter is the news media is blatantly playing with people's emotions and manipulating you. It's not the first time, but it is definitely a major point going into 2021. It's a setup. And we should be angry about this. I understand having more than one source and having sources that don't want to be named. But if I have a source and that source doesn't want to be named because of the potential political backlash, okay, at least make sure that they were firsthand witnesses to the information you're reporting on. Because if they're not, it doesn't matter. You can have 15 sources that weren't in the conversation, that weren't in the room, that weren't involved with it, and it doesn't matter. They're making it up. Tell me how I am wrong on this. And I know, Greg, you agree with me. I'm sure other people who are watching disagree. Tell me how I am wrong in understanding this. That if you weren't in the meeting and someone told, when you hear the words, and I want to be very clear about this, when we hear Maggie Haberman say 2 people briefed on the discussion is her source, what were they briefed? Who briefed them? So did someone else walk up and say, I hate Trump. I bet he's going to commit martial law in 2021 to stop Joe Biden. Is that your source? Is that the sum total? Where do you get that from? Well, I heard about a meeting and someone mentioned it to President Trump in that meeting. Oh my God, you're right. He is planning martial law. Is that the sum total of the news media is that the limit of what we expect from our news media today? That someone told them they heard about something that happened? Is that what we're supposed to consider credible? This is from the New York Times, supposedly the best, most credible news in the nation, although they're not. And it's been proven. How many fake stories have they published? How many falsehoods have they promoted? Besides Russia collusion, How many times have they had writers that have completely made up stories? So the mantle of the best in the news, all the news that is fit to print, doesn't really apply anymore. Especially when they're having two people unnamed who were briefed on a conversation that they weren't part of, and we've got to tell the public that President Trump is trying to get martial law. That upsets me. That really upsets me. Because there are tens of thousands of people on Twitter right now that have been, since the moment I woke up this morning, that have been losing their minds on this story, that are terrified, they're angry, they're vicious, and they are taking it out on all Republicans and conservatives. And that is a problem. That's why we have the Trump Accountability Project, where they're making lists against people, and they are prejudicing themselves against people who supported President Trump, who support Republicans and conservatives, and we are all evil by definition because of stories like this one by Maggie Haberman in the New York Times, where some individual heard about a conversation and they're reporting that as actual news. Agent Black, our friend, one of our friends from overseas, Agent Black is from Britain, and he mentions Haberman is in WikiLeaks emails used to tee up stories. I wouldn't be surprised by that. Greg Weaver mentions most of the mainstream media are making up stories or fear-mongering as a matter of course. Journalism is dead. In general, I agree with you, Greg. It seems more and more apparent. And if we are actually paying attention to the details, which the public is told not to do anymore, if we're paying attention to the details, we get it. And I'm showing it to you so that you can see it. And as always, the links to the description of everything we're going to show you in the show today is going to be down there. You can read it for yourself so that you have full context and you are able to make your own decision on this. But I just want to point that out. It's in the the New York Times article in the first paragraph, and we see that it's telephone because as soon as you go to CNN politics, it suddenly changes. And I can tell you that it's so made up because the New York Times didn't lead with martial law as the headline or the basis of their news story. It was part of the news story that they were having about who's advising President Trump. But that's really interesting to me because what was part of a story in the New York Times suddenly became the story for CNN. They took it out of context. So you had a story that is based on who knows what, quite honestly. Two people who heard about a meeting that may or may not have happened and may or may not have happened the way they heard about it. And then CNN runs with that and goes, hey, wait a minute, this is the most important thing you need to know about. Wait a minute, how do you know? Nobody has an actual source. And you're playing telephone, picking out parts of an argument that you know nothing about to run with. This is crazy, folks. This is crazy. This is what our modern media has come to. So yes, one of the first things I wanted to start off with is talking about this manipulation of your emotions, the manipulation of news media to try and gin up the masses for, well, who knows what the reason is. Agent Black mentions, have a good show, Mike, and everyone. I'll have to watch later. Stay safe all. I know you're over in Britain. You're 7 hours ahead of us. So I thank you for being with us. Right now, it's about 9 o'clock for him. So I thank you for being with us. I love it when my overseas audience chime in. It's always good to see you here. And Awesome Mermaid, hello. It's good to see you. Looking forward to your comments as well. So that's one of the things. And since that's trending right now in YouTube, it is, on Google, it is driving people crazy on Twitter. I wanted to address that really quickly, that breaking news, because it's a farce. It is a farce. But it is not the only farce that we are hearing about, that we are seeing at this time. Because there's a lot of other things. And I have some sad news. Now, a lot of people may have recalled, and matter of fact, if you pay attention to the opening of the show, we have a suicide hotline, a domestic abuse hotline There's a lot of other things that we could have put on there, including drug overdoses, drug abuse, alcohol abuse. There's just not enough room on the screen for every phone number out there. But we've been saying since February of 2020 that the COVID response, the response to COVID-19 is detrimental. It is more damaging and more dangerous to the public than the actual disease, which is 97% or more survivable. We've been talking about that for a long time, since February, over 9 months. And you know what? We've been saying this reaction, the lockdowns, the separation of people, the closing of businesses, the absolute destruction of our economy is going to have consequences, negative consequences. And you know what? It has. Because we see that it is now being reported. It was first reported by Breitbart, although it's not only in Breitbart, but we see that the CDC is now coming out and saying that the response to COVID-19 has actually been more dangerous and led to record-breaking numbers of people who have died. We have overdose deaths that have reached a record-breaking number. This is terrifying. This is sad. This is absolutely sad that we now have announcements out there. We know for a fact that over 80,000 people have died because of overdoses, and that is primarily attributed to the COVID-19 reaction. In particular, we know that in San Francisco alone, as reported by the San Francisco Chronicle, 621 people have died because of overdoses so far in 2020. 173 people died because of COVID-19. We have the reaction to COVID-19 by Governor Newsom, which is almost the same as the reaction by Governor Cuomo, Governor Whitmer, and many others across the nation, have actually led to more people dying than anything else. And again, we mentioned this to people. You can go back to our conversation that was on March 17th when we were talking about coronavirus and the next 30 days beyond. Excuse me. When we were talking about the coronavirus and being positive with each other and trying to find ways to survive this, which was back on March 23rd. And even back on April 24th, when we were talking about the coronavirus and the consequences that were going to be happening to the nation because of the reaction. This is not new. We've been talking about this. And then in August 14th, the CDC came out and told us very clearly that they had already been reporting that considerably elevated adverse mental health conditions were associated with COVID-19. Younger adults, racial and ethnic minorities, essential workers, and unpaid adult caregivers have been reporting disproportionately worse mental health outcomes, increased substance abuse, and elevated suicidal ideation. The response to COVID-19 has been killing people, has been causing an increase in suicides, has been causing an increase in overdoses to drugs, has been causing the deaths of people in starvation worldwide, but also in the United States. It is destroying the public. And we hear that Governor Newsom, Governor Cuomo, Governor Whitmer are looking forward to doing further lockdowns just before we reach Christmas, going through New Year's Eve. We know that in England, they've instituted more lockdowns. This is getting worse and worse by the day. And this has got to be terrifying. And I want to be clear. It just came out. This is U.S. News talking about it. U.S. drug overdose deaths reach record highs. Over 81,000 people died from overdoses. And if you think that, well, no, you're just not taking this into account, Mike, it's not quite as bad as you think. No, I want to be very, very clear, because it said by the CDC in their health advisory on December 17th, they said it very clearly. A concerning acceleration of the increase in drug overdose deaths, with the largest increase recorded from March 2020 to May 2020, coinciding with the implementation of widespread migration measures for the COVID-19 pandemic. So the CDC is telling you, when you lock down the nation, that was the worst thing you could possibly do. Tens of thousands of Americans died just from overdoses, and we haven't yet seen the number of how many suicides have increased, although we have an indication, according to the New York GIVE report, that as of March, there was a 30% increase in the number of suicides, that there is an exponential increase in violent crime, and I believe it was a 30% increase in domestic abuse, just in New York alone. And that's only up until March. We still have April and May with that part of the lockdown still to be accounted for. We still have the rest of the year to be accounted for. And sadly, we've been talking about this since March. And we've been warning people that domestic abuse is a real thing, that this is the entire reaction to COVID-19 has only made it worse, and that people need to be taken care of. And I'll say it again. If you are having bad thoughts, the suicide hotline is 1-800-273-8255. If you are a victim of domestic abuse, the phone number is 800-799-7233. And I want people to be very aware. Those hotlines are open even as the lockdowns are in place. That was true back in the March through May period. It's true right now. You can get help. There are people willing to help you. Even if COVID lockdowns are happening, they're there to help you. Do not suffer. Do not suffer alone. Do not suffer through this. And there are people who are willing to help. You don't need to reach out to drugs and alcohol, overdose, and harming yourself or others. There is help out there. Greg mentions to us, when you take away someone's livelihood, their futures, and all hope for the future, what can you expect the human consequences will be? Greg goes on to say, these governors are not following the science, but appear to be following their own sinister agenda. I agree with you, and I've been saying it for a long time. This isn't about science, because the science, we heard from the World Health Organization, the WHO, their chief advisor for Central Europe had said very clearly, the very last resort should be lockdowns, that we need to open things up because the cure is worse than the disease. We are destroying our economies, our people, for a disease that is 97% survivable, and that doesn't make any sense. And the proof that we have been warning about here on this program for 9 months is now coming to be self-evident. We got to stop this. This is ridiculous. I'm not saying, and I want to be very clear, at no point am I saying that we can't take care of the most at-risk people. I am not saying that we can't take precautions and to help those in need. God help me. I believe in taking care of those who need help, to help those who can't help themselves. That's an American principle. But there is no way in the world am I willing to say, let me destroy my life just so that we could possibly help someone who's going to survive anyway. This isn't how you take care of a disease, by making it worse for everyone. And we know that they were wrong, because if we were paying attention to the science, the scientific evidence is, as a fact, we locked down the nation for months and COVID did not go away. Didn't go away. We are now, how many months later? over 9 months later, we're still wearing masks. We're socially distancing. Half of all the businesses are either closed permanently or are under shutdown orders by various governors, and COVID continues to spread. People are locked in their homes 75% of the time, and COVID is still spreading. That's why over Thanksgiving, we saw governors make insanely outrageous requests or demands, saying you can't even have 10 people in your home. You can't have your family come over and see you. You can't be amongst friends because COVID will get you. Because, as soon as you hit 11 people, well, COVID knows there's 11 people there and it's going to target you. Just like COVID targets people after 10 p.m. at night. And it targets people who are standing instead of those who are sitting. And it targets people who didn't eat a meal but are drinking instead. COVID is incredibly smart. COVID targets you if you are in a crowd of people. Well, if that happens to be a protest, COVID will let you go because protests against Orange Man bad. COVID likes that. But if you happen to be protesting for President Trump or for America or for anything else, well, then 11 people, it's suddenly going to target you. That's not called science. That's not even called pseudoscience. That's called making it up for your own political gain. That is manipulating the public. I don't know. This stuff makes me really, really upset. And it seems that several people agree with this. I know in the past, Agent Black, our friend from Britain in Scotland, has said many times that this is outrageous, the overreach, and it has not helped anyone. And by the way, yes, and I do realize just before coming onto the show, I see that in England, there is a new mutation of the COVID-19 virus, which means all of the vaccines that everyone's been screaming about and they're all so hyper about are completely useless. Because if there's a new mutation of it, the vaccine won't help you at all. Shocking. Because that happens with the flu every year. Every season, there is a new mutation of the flu virus. And that's why the vaccines from the year before don't work. So now we're getting out this vaccine and it's now mutating. So the vaccine's really useless. Shocking. But the answer isn't, let's lock everyone in their homes. Let's close all the gyms. Let's close all the restaurants. We're going to close basically everything. Movie theaters, you name it. They're closing it all so that you can sit in your house because COVID somehow won't get into your house, even though it's airborne, but it won't get you unless you walk outside your door. This is stupid, people. Can we all not agree with that? That there are many ways we can try and help those who are most at risk of COVID-19 without destroying the nation and having these silly made-up rules that change very often day by day. I mean, Governor Cuomo, I don't know, he has a bad cup of coffee. He wakes up in the morning and suddenly we have a new set of rules. And that's not, I wish I was being facetious and making this up. The man has done that. It seems like he wakes up, he has a bad cup of coffee, and he says, oh, well, that county is now suddenly shut down. We have a new set of rules. There's like the green light, yellow light, red light thing. He just makes it up. And then denies when everything that he's making up winds up being absolutely deadly to people. He just brushes it off. It's not my fault. He killed 12,000 people in nursing homes, but that's not his fault. It's not because of his plans, because he's following the science. Sort of, kind of, sometimes, when it agrees with his political agenda. But it's not his fault 12,000 people died. It's got to be someone else's fault. By the way, lock down all the gyms. By the way, you can't be out in a restaurant after 10 p.m. at night. Where's the science in this? So, Mermaid, by the way, Mermaid, when you're trying to leave messages, I'm not seeing them come through. I don't know why. Lola is saying, take Trump out of the ball. all of the ball game? Okay. Take Trump out to the crowd. Oh, I get it. It's a song you're singing. I don't care if it was President Trump who did the virus, the vaccine. I don't care whose vaccine it is. If COVID-19 is mutating as we expected it would, because that's what viruses do, and as like we see with the flu, every year there's going to be a new version of it, which we've been expecting, then it doesn't matter who did warp speed or what. It's not a matter. Although no one should really care because it's 97%. We don't know about the new mutation yet, but COVID is 97% survivable. 97. The vaccine is 95% effective. I have more of a chance of surviving COVID without the vaccine than with it. The people who should be concerned about the vaccine and the people who need the vaccine would be those who are in the highest risk. I mean, this is science. We're talking about science. I don't have to worry about something that's 97% survivable, but someone who, say, is over 65 years of age, has pre-existing conditions like heart disease or diabetes, they need the vaccine because their survival rate is less than that. They're somewhere in the 80% survival rate. They need it more than I do. And definitely more than a 20-year-old needs it. Mermaid, hey, now I can see your message, Mermaid. Europe is having big lockdowns because of the new strain. Expect the same here soon. I do. Well, we already knew the United States was going to get locked down. It was the COVID advisor for Joe Biden already said 2 weeks ago that he wants to lock down the United States for 6 weeks. The same lockdowns that we have seen that have led to 81,000 overdose deaths and an absolutely unknown number of deaths because of suicide and because of domestic abuse. Something that they have yet to allow the public to know. Because the news media, those wonderful, up-to-date people, aren't releasing the numbers. And the government, I can tell you right now, I have a FOIA that is still waiting to be filled out by New York State, trying to give me more of an update on some of the numbers of what's been happening. And I've been waiting for this for over a month. New York State has contacted me and said, oh, we're getting those numbers for you. They exist. They're getting them for me, but somehow they seem to not be able to get it to me yet. I'm expecting sometime in 2021, they're finally going to give me the numbers, even though I've been waiting for this forever. This is upsetting. Lola's busy singing here. But this is very upsetting, folks. Because we know that we're on the wrong path. Lockdowns is not the answer. Lockdowns have caused more people to die than anything else we've done. And I know, over 1 million people have died around the world. How many people have starved in the meantime? How many people have died because of domestic abuse? How many people have committed suicide because of their mental health deteriorating from drugs and alcohol because of the way that we are dealing with COVID? This is all predictable because, as we said, we went back in time and we told you about this back in March and in April. We were telling you that these things were going to happen. This is completely predictable and easily known, and every single elected official, Republican or Democrat, Libertarian, Conservative, I don't care, everyone knew this was going to happen. Greg mentions, how many people actually died strictly from COVID? Not that many, as it appears that if you died from another cause, such as suicide, car accident, shooting, etc., it was counted as a COVID death. Well, that's one of the other problems. We have no way of knowing. There have been legitimate questions saying many of the experts throughout the entire year have said that the number of deaths attributed to COVID-19 could be as high as 25% overinflated. could be as much as 25%, could be more. But no one is actually double checking. The one state that I know of, which was Pennsylvania, that did look back at their records and corrected it, dropped the number of cases of COVID by about 11,000. But no one's really talking about that, and no one's going over that. It's part of the reason why we're not hearing the news media tell you about the number of deaths. They're telling you about the number of cases, assuming that somehow the number of deaths must be connected to the number of cases, which doesn't seem to be true. Just because you caught coronavirus doesn't mean you're going to die from coronavirus. COVID-19 is not necessarily going to kill you. Matter of fact, we know almost everyone survives. So because the numbers are so much lower, especially if you start comparing it to other things, like the number of people who die from not typhus, it's a lung disease, starts with a T, and I can't think of it right now. Several diseases out there. It's not in the top 10. People are dying from things like diabetes far more than they are from coronavirus. But yet we're terrified and shut down the nation because of coronavirus. Jim Derringer mentions fear, the ultimate tool of propaganda. And that's what 2020 has been. It has been a year of nothing but propaganda. By the way, I should mention, we are working on our year-end 2020 top list of videos. It'll be coming out next week. Keep an eye out for that. Thank you, Greg. Yes, tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is like number 10 in the United States and in the world in terms of cause of death. And you can check that with the CDC. You can check that with the WHO. It's consistent. It's always one of the top 10 killing people around the world. And it kills more people than COVID-19. But yet we don't shut down the world because of that. And yes, their fear this has been the message of 2020, and I believe 2021, at least the very beginning, is it's all about fear. That's why we have people who are talking about in the New York Times, they're talking to us about we should be afraid about this conspiracy, this message of martial law, when nothing exists. We don't even know who is in the room to tell us. We have no idea what conversation's going on, but we should be afraid. You're on Twitter, be afraid. Because Orange Man may have heard someone say something about the potential of a martial law. And that's just terrifying. Oh, the world's going to end. Really, come on. We deserve so much better, folks. And by the way, let me again remind everyone, if you're watching this on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook, if Facebook will ever allow it, and they have not, if Facebook allows it back on, you're able to reach us there, or you can always call into the show at 607-242-1582. And yes, folks, I'm checking right now, and Facebook has completely shut us down. I don't know why. They've sent us no notification. They've given us no information. They have just completely blocked us from being able to speak with you, the public. And I have, and everything we're talking about is backed up by actual evidence. I'm presenting it to you as we speak. So I don't know what their problem is, besides the fact that Facebook, along with Twitter, along with Google, don't like the public talking, which may be one of the main reasons why we see lockdowns, because it stops people from being able to enact their First Amendment right to assemble and to talk and to come up with solutions or to consider what's being done in government. In fact, speaking of that, that reminds me of my yesterday. You may have seen it. We did a breaking news live stream talking about what's happening in West Palm Beach, Florida. I don't know how many people have seen that. I don't know how many people are aware of it. But in West Palm Beach this weekend, there was a gathering of, I believe it was somewhere around 4,000 college students from across the country and other individuals, but primarily college students, were gathering at what's called the Student Action Summit, SAS. And this is in West Palm Beach, Florida, that they are gathering at. It's something that was planned out. It's basically similar to CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference that goes on every year, traditionally in Maryland every year. But the SAS is organized by Turning Point USA, which is more right-leaning. Well, they went down. The students went down. The event started yesterday, December 19th at 5:30, and it's scheduled to go until the 22nd. Thousands of students came in, and for no reason that is discernible or has been announced, the mayor of West Palm Beach shut down the students, sent in police, stopped students from being able to go to the event, kicked them basically out to the streets. And we were reporting on that yesterday. Give me a moment, folks. I'm going to come to the comments in 1 second. And we can see, and this is reported by Todd Starnes, who is a blue check on Twitter. So he's a nationally syndicated radio host, and he's mentioning leftist goons can burn down city blocks, but conservative kids can't gather in a convention center. Hashtag SAS 2020, TPUSA, Donald Trump Jr., Kim Guilfoyle. And yeah, we broke the news on this yesterday. We were first ones out speaking about this nationally, and it should be top headline news that for no reason other than their political belief, a mayor is punishing people for having a political belief of their own. That's sad. Let me come back to the comments. Jim Derringer said, the problem is that the average individual is a victim of the educational system, which has in turn made them pliable. It is a terrifying future where children let their government think for them. I agree. Greg Weaver mentions Facebook uses a Chinese contractor to fact check and censor, amongst others, but their fact check has been proven to be wrong multiple times. They're not fact checking, they're censoring. They're saying, we don't like this, so you can't say it. We've seen, Twitter has been the most blatant about it when they've come out and they literally blacked out the New York Post from talking about the Hunter Biden laptop and his connection to China and the Ukraine and the influence peddling that's going on in the Biden family with Jim Biden, the brother of Joe Biden, and Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden. And the news media, again, told us it's absolutely nothing. This is a fake story. There's nothing to this. There's no proof, no evidence, even though we have a laptop that's with the FBI, even though we have, even though we have Tony Bublowski, who came out publicly, announced and declared that all of the information is correct, provided emails to verify everything he was speaking about, and clearly made affidavits saying that there was a problem and influence peddling is going on. The media told us absolutely no, it's not true, wrong, until after the election 2 weeks ago, when they suddenly come out and CNN, Jake Tapper suddenly goes, hey, breaking news. Guess what? Hunter Biden's being investigated for irregularities and tax evasion and money that he received from China and the Ukraine, which means we were right all along. We've known this to be true. Greg Weaver mentions, just wait until the new administration takes over to see what happens to conservatives being censored. Well, we already know. And we covered this before on the show. We know that Senator Blumenthal, Senator Leahy have absolutely demanded that Twitter, Facebook, Google, that they have more censorship, not less. They're demanding that there is increased censorship, specifically to shut down the voices of Republicans and conservatives, to shut down the conversations that Americans can have, and that they want to change Section 230 to make sure that there is more government intervention and that there is more censorship and less free speech and less of a First Amendment. So we know what's going to happen with the new administration. The Democrats are already telling us they're going to have more censorship. They're going to be able to shut down people's voices. Jim Derringer mentions that's the idea. Censorship denies the individual a voice, forcing them into corners where violence seems acceptable. Forcing a divide starts with censoring a specific ideology. You know, I agree with you. I mean, this is what we hear. Let me go back to it. This is what Todd Starnes was saying, that leftist goons, you could literally, the media and the internet overlords are more than happy to promote BLM and Antifa as they burn down buildings. As I was mentioning yesterday, it's perfectly okay to have a arson going on and burning down a building as CNN's reporter stands in front of that burning building to the national media and says, well, this is mostly peaceful. Which by definition, if it is mostly peaceful, then it is not peaceful. And that is okay. And burning down cities like Minneapolis, like Portland, like Seattle, like New York City, Austin, we can go through city after city, burning down cities, destroying property, destroying people's lives, and literally killing at least 30 or more people, like Jessica Dottie Whitaker, like the 6-year-old in Atlanta, like the 16 and 19-year-old in Seattle, killing these kids, and David Dorn, don't let me leave out David Dorn, that you can kill these individuals and that's perfectly fine. And the media will publish that every day and say, this is the best thing that could possibly happen. It is great news. This is a good thing that these people have died and that these buildings have been destroyed and people's lives have been utterly devastated. And that's okay. But God forbid if 3,000, 4,000 college students who happen to be Republicans gather together so that they can talk amongst each other. Oh, that we have to shut down right now. And by the way, we broke that news. As you can see here, breaking news, West Palm Beach mayor ditches students in the cold. That's what he did. Without any proof, without any reason. As we proved in the show yesterday. And that's something that is still not trending to today. That is still something that Twitter, Facebook, Google will not talk about. We did. We broke the news. Gateway Pundit is talking about it. Campus Reform has brought it up. But the news media will not tell you that conservatives are being punished for being able to speak to each other. You should be afraid. You should be concerned. You should be against this. This should be trending. Because if this was BLM, if this was Antifa, and some mayor said, you can't gather, you can't speak with each other, and we're shutting down your First Amendment rights, I guarantee you that would be on every major news media station's program across the nation, denouncing that elected official and denouncing the denial of the First Amendment. And I call for the same thing. Mayor Kevin James of West Palm Beach should be removed from office, besides the other ethics violations that have come up throughout this entire year, as we showed yesterday. Besides those ethic violations, this should be a reason to have him removed from office as soon as possible. Because it's called the First Amendment for a reason. I don't know. This is aggravating to me. It's angering. And I think we should all be upset about this. Jim mentions the sad thing is that they're targeting kids, which is a surefire means of soliciting violence out of them, thereby delegitimizing their cause in the process. Well, I can say for a clear fact that the kids at the Student Action Summit, the SAS in West Palm Beach, they have not resorted to violence. They have not destroyed the city. They did not burn down. Maybe that's what they should have done, but they have not done any of that. Unlike with BLM, They have not gone out and they have not broken windows. They have not burned down a city. They have not beat up on people who didn't agree with them. They have not shut down the city and stopped people from being able to drive to and from work. They have not done any of that, which we have seen repeatedly from BLM and Antifa across the entire nation. Unlike even here in my own, in the southern tier of New York, where BLM gathered together and in the middle of the night went out, woke people up from their homes, woke up the kids that are trying to go to sleep, marching along in the middle of the night for no reason other than to disturb the entire public because they want to make a point. Guess what? The conservative students don't do that. They did get on Twitter. They did make announcements on social media, but they didn't destroy anyone's ability to live their lives, which is a big difference, and we should be celebrating that as well as defending their First Amendment rights. Jim Derringer mentions, and by the way, folks, anyone can comment. If you disagree, leave a comment. You can call into the show, 607-242-1582. You can call in. You can leave a message on Twitter or on YouTube. I'd say Facebook, but Facebook has decided that you do not deserve to be able to hear this information, that you should not be able to have a conversation. Facebook has denied you the First Amendment right to do this. Again, this is the censorship that we're seeing from the left. You can't speak about things because they decided you can't. It doesn't matter if there are facts here. You don't have that right, according to Facebook. But going back to what Jim mentions, Jim says the sad thing is that I did say that. Greg says, we are shifting towards a communist Chinese model of personal freedoms, or I would actually say a communist version of silencing the people. Slavery. Jim goes on to say the young are the most prone to violence as a solution to censorship, not a coincidence. Well, that's very true, because they don't have as much patience as adults generally do. Although, if you're talking about the progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic Socialists of America, I can tell you that the Democratic Socialists of America, their Ithaca chapter, were more than willing to go out and commit acts of violence. They started fights on purpose, as was reported in Ithaca newspapers and that we reported on this program. They were more than willing to go out and start fighting people because they had wrongthink, because they didn't agree politically with the Democratic Socialists of America. And I expect that to get worse. Jim goes on, that's what they want, is what I'm suggesting. They are desperate to encourage that portion of the generation to give way like their BLM peers. Thank God those kids are not. The conservatives are not. Because you're right. They do want these kids, and I guarantee you that if conservative students were to do what BLM and Antifa do, if they were to actually go out and block off people driving to and from their homes, going to and from work, that they would be demonized for doing the exact same things we've seen BLM do. That if they were to break a window, or if a window were to break while they were protesting for whatever reason, they would be demonized and blamed for every bit of damage there, and told that they're destroying the economy and that they were evil for doing that, even though we have seen BLM, Antifa, Indivisible New York, the Democratic progressives and socialists have done far, far worse in this nation. There's over $2 billion of damages that we can show directly attributable to BLM and Antifa, and no one in the news media calls them out in the mainstream. And we are blamed as racist for even bringing it up, even though it is an absolute fact. I don't know. But I do advise, if you haven't seen it yet, I do advise, please do check out our breaking news segment that we streamed 15 hours ago, talking about West Palm Beach and the way that it's not just censorship now. This is outright punishment. This is directly a political action that someone is saying, oh, you have the wrong politics. I'm going to disrupt your life and I am going to mess with you and leave you in the streets because I don't agree. No elected official should be allowed to do that. I don't care what political preference they have. I don't care what party they're in. They could be Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, and libertarians. It doesn't matter. No one has that right to do that, and they should be called out and ostracized for it. Jim mentions it's a great burden to exercise patience and forgiveness in the face of that kind of oppression. I'm not advocating patience and forgiveness. I'm not. I'm not advocating violence either. But I am advocating that we need to speak up and take a stance against this, that we need to call it for what it is and not allow it to slip on by as, oops, I guess that happened. Oh, it happened to conservatives. It happened to the Trump supporters. Well, tomorrow it could happen to you. If you don't happen to be a card-carrying communist, a democratic socialist like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, then it could happen to you too. And we have seen over and over and over again where that did happen. Look at what happened in Russia. Many of those who helped usher in socialism in Russia were the people stuck in gulags. We saw that in China. We've seen that in Venezuela. We've seen that in Cuba. There is no protection. Lola, what is going on that you're singing? Anyway. But so I'm not advocating that we just have patience and forgive the mayor of West Palm Beach and all the others and the people that are putting together the Trump Accountability Project, the list of Republicans and conservatives and individuals who supported Trump or in fact opposed Joe Biden and the progressive movement of the Democratic Party. And I do always like to make that difference. I'm not talking about rank and file Democrats. I'm talking about the progressives, which are a splinter group. They aren't the majority of Democrats in the United States. Progressives are a very small group of very hyper radical political groups. They have a lot of names that they go by. They go with the names of, they used to be Acorn. They have the Democratic Socialists of America. They have Democratic Socialism. They have, there's so much I'm trying to get out. It's all jumbling together. It's all there, but it's troubling. It's so troubling. So Greg mentions, unfortunately, when you're fighting against communists, they only understand and react to violence and nothing else, which historically has been very, very true. I mean, look at what happened in Peru. When I did my interview with in Peru, we found that's exactly what happened. And we've seen that in Venezuela and everywhere else in the world. So sadly, that is true. Mavis mentions it's just another troll. Well, I'm not even paying attention to, it's just too much stuff. Greg says, progressives equal regressiveness. They do. And they are. That's why we know that Joe Biden, under the doctrine with the progressives, he's going to add $34 billion in new taxes. That's the minimum estimate of what he's going to do day one. He's already said that he's going to bring back the tax rates that were in the Obama presidency. And he's going to raise taxes. Now imagine, we already know for a fact that some 20% of businesses across the nation, about 1 in 5, have shut forever. We know for a fact that it is, we know that it is expected that in New York, in New Jersey, in Colorado, across the nation, that if there are additional lockdowns, roughly some 40% of businesses are going to shut their doors forever, on top of the 20% that already shut their doors forever. And now for those businesses that might be left, they can be very happy to know that Joe Biden has decided that he's going to increase their tax rates. At the same time that he wants to increase the minimum wage, which we have seen in every example that has happened across the nation, has resulted in a 30% decrease in business, in the number of businesses, of the number of people who are working. It's actually helped to increase the net poverty level, which falls right in line with what the CBO told the United States in 2018. This is absolute devastation and destruction. Not even going into the fact that Joe Biden wants to make you pay taxes on property you already own. In particular, if you have a firearm, he wants you to pay a tax on the gun that you already own. Why? And I definitely say, I dare you to make me pay that. Why should I? Greg mentions he's also a fan of, quote, build back better, end quote, which is a slogan of the globalists. Great reset is coming in the first 100 days, according to John Kerry. You know, I would hope not, but John Kerry is also the same man who made a deal with Iran, and Iran is very happy that Joe Biden is elected, but made the deal with Iran that gave them $150 billion in cash so that they could fund global terror. And then Secretary John Kerry admitted and stated clearly to the public, which the news media downplayed immediately, but said very clearly, yes, some of the money is going to go to the Iranian Guard and that this would help fund global terror. They made the Iran nuclear deal to fund global terror. And he's saying, he said that was a great idea. So are you surprised when John Kerry says, well, the Great Reset, as promoted by our Trudeau up in Canada, are you surprised they're saying that's a great idea too? It's horrible. I don't know. It's something about the progressives. The only thing they seem to know how to do is to destroy everything that's working fine beforehand because of their feelings. They feel like you should have communism because they feel like communism is going to work great for everyone, except it's never been proven to work for anyone, ever. And we already see what the elements of this movement towards socialism are going to bring us. We already hear that Democrats are out there saying they need more censorship. Senator Leahy and Senator Blumenthal already said that. And you can go to CNN, we covered it as well. They've already said they want more censorship. We know that people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants to destroy the system, wants to destroy the economy. Unless you think that, building a railroad from America from the continental U.S. to to Hawaii is realistic in the space of 5 years without increasing the net global warming. This is crazy. No, I don't have COVID. Thank you very much. I've been tested before. I don't have COVID. Oh, my God. Really, Lola? Is that the best thing you can say? So this is very troubling, folks. And these are the conversations that we need to have. We absolutely need to have these conversations because we can't make sure that freedom is going to exist for everyone in America, and I mean everyone in America, if we can't make sure that it's there for any one part of America. I mean, I think that's pretty straightforward. And we need to have these conversations. Oh, but we have a call coming in. Hello, and thank you for calling No Soundbites Allowed. This is your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of Southern Tier. Who am I speaking to?
Hey Mike, it's Jason. How you doing?
Hey, Jason. For folks who haven't been on the show before, Jason is a frequent caller to the program, just like you can be. What's going on, Jason?
Well, after this week and all that storm, I have one thing to say. It's basically when it comes to the weather, man, I'm pretty sure that what happened was the pollsters lost their job and they decided to start predicting the weather. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not sure if you felt that as well.
Well, I felt the 42 inches of snow that came down, that's for sure.
Yeah, when you wake up in the morning and you're expecting 12 inches and all of a sudden you get 42, you're like, yeah, somebody failed here.
Big time. That's just slightly more than you might have expected. It's only record-breaking numbers. It's crazy, but isn't that true of everything in government nowadays? Isn't that true of the news media overall? Don't worry about what we said because we have something else to say. It doesn't matter. Just keep believing us. We're always honest. It's just crazy.
Well, this is the one thing I was going to mention. This is a problem with that elitist class of individuals, that continues to be able to get away with being wrong all the time, and they just never lose their job. I mean, when it comes to pollsters, you can be wrong a billion times. You're still going to, be hired to do the next polls the following, 4 years or 2 years or whatever. And weatherman, well, I mean, the weather's unpredictable, so they will get away with it as well too. um, but one of the things I was gonna mention is
Yeah.
that when it comes to the experts and the politicians and just the overall way that they're trying to convey their message and to make you believe without actually ever being right. It reminds me of this whole little controversy there with Joe Biden and just the demand for people to all instantaneously give her respect, by having a DR in front of her name.
Who?
And that really just it drives you nuts. It means
Wait a
that
minute. Wait
when
a
she,
minute. Who are you referring to? I'm not sure I followed that.
oh, the president, or we're talking about Joe Biden's wife.
Oh, Jill Biden. Okay, you're talking about Jill Biden being a doctor. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. That's what I said. I'm sorry, I might be a little disconnect here. But yeah, I mean, and so the point I'm saying is that there's this thing, especially among the elites and especially among the left, and it's called the white coat theory. As soon as an individual puts on a coat, you walk into the doctor's office, anything that actually comes out of that person because they're wearing that, irregardless of whether or not they actually know what they're talking about, they get credentials and power for doing so. And so you can't question them, you can't, debate them, you can't fact check them, but they can fact check you. And that's the position of power. And it's just you see that happening there, and then it extends to other things that we continually see happening with the coronavirus.
Well, I'll give you a great
Um,
example. Well, it's not even just coronavirus. Uh, we had a tweet that we saw recently that the number of shootings in Utica are up above 2019 levels for 2020. And this is similar to the violence that we've seen throughout the entire nation. And the funny thing is, weren't we told by the officials, the elected officials, in particular Governor Cuomo, but the entire Democratic single political party movement in New York State, that if you had the red flag laws, if you had the New York Safe Act, well, the number of shootings would go down. If you were locked in your home, the number of shootings would go down, and yet they're going up. And this isn't just true of in Utica, but throughout the entire nation. But we're supposed to believe them because they're the experts. It's ridiculous.
that's a frustrating thing. And there's one thing I read that I thought was interesting, and it was just a highlight of the difference between liberal thinking and more of conservative thinking. And part of the thing is with conservatives, there's a realization that not all problems can be solved, and at the end of the day, you're just basically trying to compromise, with the less of two evils. Because unlike the progressives and especially the socialists, um, you can't end all suffering. And the thing is that with socialism and a lot of these Marxists and the AOCs, they want this perfection of utopia. And the only way to get to end individual suffering is essentially to end life. And that essentially is exactly what happens when it comes to these ideologies. And it just continues to repeat. But I mean, you're 100% right when you were looking at the gun crimes and all these other situations. Because why do they get worse? Because again, they go down a route of looking for a perfection that they believe that they can have, and it just further acerbates and makes things far worse than they would be.
I think it's because, well, think about it. They're exasperating the
Yep.
problem because what are they doing? They're doing bail reform. So the same criminal who was arrested, and we saw this out in Seattle with the guy, the Antifa member who killed a conservative for no reason besides the fact that he supported Trump, where he was arrested for having a gun. He was released, and then he turned around and he killed somebody. And this is okay for the progressive movement because he has the right thinking, because he's a member of Antifa. This is crazy. This is why they promote so much violence, is because they have no accountability. There is no accountability because as long as you say, but I believe what you believe, you can do anything you want. You can burn down cities, as we have seen them do. And the media goes, well, that's not really a problem. But if you're a conservative and you're down in Florida, well, that is a problem. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it's about the hierarchy of the victim and the victimizer. The bottom line is that no matter what happens, Antifa will always be seen as the victims that are rebelling against the victimizer. And in a lot of ways, it's that their hierarchy used to be on class, and income, and then now it's well, I guess with the Antifa it is as well too. But then as we see, it's more of a division between race as well. But the one thing I was going to make an observation on was about the masks at this point.
Okay.
The theory itself, with masks, I mean, it's still based upon droplets and how they work, right? And the thing that just drives me nuts is that, by the own, here you have Biden, right? He's going out and says the first thing he wants to do as soon as he gets in there, he's going to put everybody a mandate for 100 days or whatever with masks. And that's his whole idea. But one thing, what'd you say?
One of them. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so the one thing that kills me about this is that there's now at least if the masks are totally based upon the what I would call the droplet theory. It's basically stopping droplets from spreading. Well, the thing is that we already know that certain masks do a better job at stopping droplets. I'm not even arguing the COVID.
No, let me correct something there.
Yeah.
There is no mask unless you have a N95 surgical mask or a surgical quality mask, then your mask is doing nothing. It is completely useless, and it is just there for the image. That is a scientific fact. You want to talk about science? That's the science. Unless you have an N95 mask, you don't have a mask that's actually stopping COVID.
Yes, and that's pretty much what I was going to say. Is that at this point, so my point is going to be this: is that if they're so push and they know that the N95 are the only things going to protect us, yet the Biden team, they haven't said anything about increasing the effectiveness or the efficiency of masks, and yet they want to demand that everybody wears them, irregardless of how well they work, and so, one of the trends you see happening is that they seem to be enforcing greater restrictions on individuals for not complying and putting something on their face, but yet there is no movement to actually increase the quality, to in their terms is basically to stop the spread of the droplets.
Because it's not about that. It's not about that. It's about compliance. That's why that when you're getting the vaccine, there is a vaccine card, and more businesses are starting to, and more of a movement is being pushed towards you to be able to be out in public, to go do your job, to be able to do anything, you have to show your vaccine card, which means that if you don't, you're going to be isolated. Now, one of the things I expect in 2021 under a Biden administration is they're going to mandate. Well, they're not going to mandate the injections and the COVID vaccine, which now is useless because COVID is mutating. But what they're going to say is, if you want to get the $600 government help, the government aid, $300 a week, $600 one time cash is being discussed now in Congress. You're going to have to show a vaccine card and show that to the state to verify that you're no longer COVID susceptible, and then they'll give you the money. And that's about conditioning people like a Pavlovian dog and teaching you that, oh, you have to submit. And if you don't, well, we're going to punish you. And they're not going to punish you like, oh, well, bad for you. We're going to now isolate you. You're just not going to get any help, any money, any government aid, any of the things they're going to give other privileged people who do have that. That's what I see happening. And that's what I'm terrified of.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. I think that the one thing that you mentioned, though, about the fact that there's a new strand coming out, the question of whether or not the current vaccine or even getting coronavirus the first round will actually protect you at all from, the second time that you get it is going to be a very, good question. I was going to mention, something here too about trying to get detailed information more on some of these studies. Like the one thing I was having an issue with before is that, I mean, I was able to go online and find out, I think some information from the CDC at one point. You could find out what different masks would do percentage wise, according to, like, for example, your homemade mask, your N95, and then just from a bandana, and they used to split it up. Now it looks like Google kind of like purged all that information. So the only thing you can actually find now comes directly from the CDC website. A second thing that I see that is extremely concerning is that, I've been doing research to try to find out what genetic variants that individuals have that actually have a harder time with the virus. And so now I'm going through and trying to Google, the specific variants and finding this information. And while I could, about a week ago, I'm finding now it looks like Google is like purging this stuff out. So if I want to go, and check my variants to see whether or not I have, have a potential to have it worse or maybe not as bad, I'm not able to do that as easily as I once was. And I really think that it's getting to a point where when you just can't find anything that you want, like this data, it's getting scary.
Well, it's part of a process. It's part of a process. And I don't think, and I guarantee you, the information isn't removed from Google. You just can't find it. It's shadow banning. It's been hidden away under such specific terms and in such a way that you can't type out and find it. It's meant that, yeah, this way they can honestly say, oh, we didn't hide anything. It's still right there. You just have to go through this very specific chain of words to search for it to find it. Oops, it's your fault that you didn't know what that chain was. It's not our fault that you couldn't figure out that you need to put in XYZ going to Zulu to be able to find the information you're looking for. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And that's a big problem.
Yeah, it is. And let me just give you an example of what I was trying to do is, like, you can't tell me that I'm the only guy out there that isn't looking at wanting to see the research that's coming out and some of the data, because I mean, they've found the genes and they've found the what they call the markers, the SNPs, that actually have different higher percentages, of individuals being hospitalized by it or having certain different problems. And obviously all I want to do is I want to just find my genotype, and compare it to what's on there. And it should be on like the first page of Google, because like I said, everybody's got to be, anybody with a 23andMe, 23andMe and have the data or any other of those genetic things, people have got to be pouring through that, wanting to know am I at risk? And you know what? Google basically says, guess what? You're not allowed to know, because if you do, then probably they're thinking, well, you know what? You're gonna take higher risk, or maybe you won't take the vaccine because you're thinking that you are less susceptible for it. So they don't want that information, and so basically they just shut you down to even find it.
Well, to paraphrase Senator Blumenthal, this is censorship for your best interest. It's to help you because you don't need to know that. You don't need to know. That's what they're saying is you don't need to know. I mean, this is what things have come down to. Social media has come down to censorship. You can't find that and you can't have that conversation because it's not healthy for you, because someone else decided to do that. And then they send out their minions like little trolls, like what we're seeing with Lola here on here, who's trying to hide any other comment that's being made with this nonsensical singing, these comments, because they have nothing honest to add to the conversation. All they want is to distract and destroy the thoughts that people have. They want to try and stop you and to force you to comply. And that's why I'm not on Facebook right now, because Facebook wants to force compliance. Oh, Mike, you've had too many conversations with people showing them information and they have a thought. You can't do that. So Facebook blocked me. And now I have one of several trolls who are constantly in the stream trying to hide people's thoughts because you can't speak. That is one of the greatest dangers to our nation and to us individually that I can think of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Facebook situation, I understand that they've been cracking down pretty hard on anybody who talks about, the election already.
I talk about everything. And
Yeah.
everything I've said about the election has been proven data. I've actually they can't come to me. That's why they don't. You've noticed, if you ever go to Facebook and look me up on there, you will not see any of their fact checkers. It's not because that they don't know I exist. Oh, they do. It's because I have the actual information linked to everything I'm talking about, and I've shown it on the screen, and so they can't question it. They can't say, well, that's a lie, that you made that up. It's like, no, here it is. Here's the evidence. You don't like my conclusion, that's up to you, but here's the evidence. And they don't want that conversation to happen amongst people.
Yeah.
And
like your earlier comments when you were talking about Trump, and then they're trying to blow up the martial law situation, that there, I mean, to me it's just a massive distraction, and it's so irritating to hear that come out like that, and to be made such a big deal of, because there's just so much other information that's coming out on a lot of these irregularities in these different places. And then you're finding out right now what's happening is that a lot of the judges and governments are just trying to ice it as long as they can, just so we don't find out more information.
Well, much like we saw with Hunter Biden's laptop, a month later has been proven and is actually true. I guarantee you 6 months from now, into a Biden administration, we're going to hear, oh, by the way, there were irregularities in this election. And unlike the Secretary of Pennsylvania, who said that this was the most secure election ever, that it wasn't. We're going to find that out 6 months from now, in the middle of 2021, when it's too late to do anything about it. That's what
absolutely.
I believe.
No, you're 100% right, and it's frustrating to just kind of like sit back and just watch this kind of all come together.
But we're not sitting back. I want to say we are not alone, and we are not sitting back. I've said this with Mark Meckler. I've said this at several of the events that I've spoken at. I've said it on this program. I'll say it again. We are not alone, and we are not without power. That's why they're trying so hard to shut us down. That's why and I mean everyone, not just me and Facebook, but everyone. They're shutting it down, and they're making it hard for people to have these conversations because they are terrified of us realizing, very simply, we are the people. We are the power of the United States government. We have control, and when we speak to each other, we have better solutions than the government will ever come up with. That's just a fact.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
But let me do this. There's a couple more things I want to bring up in the show today. And I do want to give people a chance to also call in. I always love everything you bring up because you brought up some great points. And people should be concerned. If you are concerned about masks, you're right. They should be having an N95 qualified mask. But stay on, stick around. Hopefully, I'm looking through the comments and I'm avoiding the troll at the moment. But I'm there with you and I am paying attention. Okay?
All right. Sounds good. Talk to you later. Bye.
Right. And folks, again, everyone is able to call in. The phone number is 607-242-1582. You don't have to agree with my conclusions. You don't have to say that you think I'm absolutely right, whether in the comments or anywhere else. If you think I'm wrong, let me know. Let's have that conversation. Let's have the conversation that we know Facebook right now will not let you have. That the conversation that we know Senator Blumenthal, Senator Leahy are trying to prevent you from being able to have. Let's have the conversation that so many want to silence because they're afraid of you figuring out something. I don't know what it is, but they don't want you to have it. Let me get back to some of the comments here. And in particular, Mike Bowie, I did see your comment, and you said, quote, inferior people seek confrontation, end quote, from the I Ching. And I agree with you. And that's why we see BLM, Antifa, we see the Democratic Socialists of America, we see this movement, and it's always surrounded by violence because they're trying to intimidate people. And as we have always said on this program, and I will say it again, we denounce and reject any organization and any individual that uses intimidation, fear, the violence or the threat of violence to cause other people to submit against their will. We denounce that. We disagree with that. And I don't care where it's coming from. That should always be true. As for trolls, then they're annoying, but we do ignore them for the most part. So something else I wanted to bring up here today, because we're talking about a lot of themes, and we're talking about what the media is trying to make you think. Yes. Yes, Mavis. The trolls' comments are copy and paste. It's just meant, again, it's meant to distract you. It's meant to prevent you from having a conversation because there's no substance. There's nothing of substance to be said. It's just, let me drown you out. And that's what the media is trying to do, drown us out with all these other thoughts so that we can't actually focus on what's going on. In particular, I'll give you a great example of that. There is Sarah Fuller. A lot of people may have heard in the last couple of days, Sarah Fuller is the greatest thing to happen to college football ever. She is the bestest, to quote Doomcock. She's the bestest ever because she showed up in a game for what? She's had an entire football career of like 5 minutes. Literally 5 minutes. She showed up. She kicked the ball once. She kicked the ball a second time, and that's the end of her career. That's it. She showed up twice, kicked the ball twice, once for 30 yards and once for an extra point. My God, if that isn't an example of feminism, if that isn't an example of a woman getting it done, she is the best. Why is the NFL not drafting Sarah Fuller right now? Because she hasn't done anything. She doesn't qualify for it, and it's not worth it. But I can tell you, Sarah Fuller is the bestest ever because after 5 minutes of game time, her Vanderbilt uniform is on display at the College Football Hall of Fame because she's the bestest ever. Because obviously she deserved it. She earned it because she's the first. And she did so much to enjoy that. She did so much to earn that. This is upsetting. And this is, again, it's meant both as a distraction and a reinforcement that you have to accept this, that this is just all there is. And it's upsetting. And it's highly upsetting. Now, I'm not saying that, well, I am saying women in in the NFL would be destroyed. They'd be hurt. And I'm pretty sure Sarah Fuller is smart enough to know to end her career before she got hurt. I'm sure of it. Not that she's not an incredible woman, that she isn't an incredible person and capable of doing all kinds of things. I'm not questioning that. I am questioning, quite literally, her ability to be on par in football with everyone else in that team and that they play. And she definitely has not earned the right to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. But we're getting told that, no, this has to be the case. Just like we're being told that Trump has to be deciding that martial law is going to happen because of two unnamed individuals who were told about a conversation that they didn't actually witness. And that's considered the truth by the New York Times. With all the news that's fit, reporting the news, that's all the news that's fit to be news. It's ridiculous what we're seeing here. Michael goes into what happens if the kick is blocked and she has to make a tackle. Well, what do you mean? All 5'6", 100 pounds of her? I mean, really? No, she's not tackling a 300-pound guy. Well, rather, she could try and bounce off of him. They'll be useless. Which is why she ended her career before that moment could happen. She is a token. And actually, if I were Sarah Fuller, I would be very upset. She has been used to make a point. She has been used as a political tool. And it's sad. It is incredibly sad. It's as sad as Lola, who's in the comments right now. It's like being a troll. They're trolling people about what's real in college football, what's really going on. It's meant to be a distraction so that you don't notice what's actually happening. So that when they tell you things like Trump is planning martial law, which is absolutely incorrect, even within their own news story, and that they have no credible way of knowing what they're talking about, you won't notice it because you're too distracted by other things. I mean, one of the other things that's very important that's going on right now, and I mentioned it a little bit, we're about to see an omnibus bill of about $1.4 trillion, as is being reported right now, that Congress finally has come together because it's the Democrats that have stopped a stimulus bill from coming through before the election. We know Nancy Pelosi was blocking that. Chuck Schumer was blocking that because they needed to wait until after the election, after Joe Biden had won with all the irregularities, and that would allow them to now put it through, and it's going to be Joe Biden's stimulus plan. It's the Democrat stimulus plan that they've put through, and this is going to mean that you're going to have roughly a $9 billion relief plan with $300 per week for those who are jobless, which is a growing number, and a direct payment of $600 for individuals, with $330 billion for business loans, and over $80 billion for schools and vaccine distribution. You know, you should wonder about that. Because here's the thing. $900 billion, and then what? See, I'm sorry, I got distracted because Mavis mentioned, I just wish the trolls would post stuff that makes sense. I think he was trying to be insulting, but it's just, well, the thing is, trolls can't post stuff that makes sense. That's why they don't. They have nothing of benefit, nothing to offer. They're there to distract you. They're there to try and anger you. And I let that, and people may ask, well, why don't you just block them? Quite honestly, so that you can see. So that you can see the low bar that they have, the very low level that they reach. They have nothing to benefit. They have nothing to give. They're attention seeking. They're desperate. Desperate to either try and silence someone or to distract the public. and try and gain some attention for themselves. And I understand this desperate outreach. And you know what? In a time of COVID where so many people have been driven to suicide, so many people have been driven to domestic abuse, alcohol and drug abuse, and so many overdose deaths, as we have seen, you know what? If this is the only way that a troll has a way of reaching out to the public and keeping their sanity, you know what? Okay, fine. Because they have nothing else. Obviously, it would seem their lives are very vacant. And this is the only way they can reach out and ask for help. And that's okay. Let the trolls do that. But I was talking about the $900 billion relief plan. And it's going to be $300 weekly for the unemployed, which is a growing number, a number that is growing by leaps and bounds because the actions of Governor Newsom, of Governor Cuomo, of Governor Whitmer are locking down our cities, our states. They are destroying businesses and closing businesses forever on an ever-growing scale. It's not that people don't want to go back to work. They can't go back to work. The jobs don't exist. And so these people are on, we are becoming beholden. Now, if you get a $600 payment, as is being proposed, I want you to understand something. That's not going to help a majority of people. Because even though we hear them talking about you're going to get a direct payment of up to $600 per individual, and that could begin this month, you got to remember something else. There was a recent study that just came out from the Stout Rees Ross LLC, where they determined that there could be up to 8 million renter households that are going to be evicted come January 1st. There are millions of people, between 9 and 14 million people, who owe somewhere between $25 and $34 billion that they can't pay rent. And you know what? $600 is not going to pay that off. That's not going to bring them up to date. This is a massive, massive problem. It is estimated, and we see this is out of Syracuse Education, University of Syracuse, where the estimate is, again, that we're going to have an epidemic, an outbreak, the largest number of people who have been evicted in the history of the nation. That should terrify people. Because this, again, is another direct consequence of COVID-19, of the reaction to COVID-19. We are watching as the government is caught in this trap. We've said you can't evict people because it's not their fault that the business that they worked at no longer exists. But they weren't absolved of all the money because they can't be. Because those business owners, those homeowners, those landlords, they still have to pay taxes. That money still has to come to them. People are living in their housing for free. You can't do that. But yet they're saying, oh, but you get $600. Won't that make all of your problems go away? Won't that help you? No, it won't. It's not making up for the fact that you can't go to work. You get $600, and then what? Oh, you got to check. And by the way, the government needs you to spend that money to keep the economy afloat, to get the taxes to be able to pay for everything that they've just given away. This would be somewhere around $2.7 trillion spent on top of just running the government. It normally costs us $4 trillion. We'll be somewhere around $7 trillion spent this year alone, maybe $8 trillion this year alone. Where's that money coming from? You can't just keep printing money. I know Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I know that Andrew Yang, they think we can just print money forever. You can't. Because the money gets devalued and suddenly you have massive inflation, which hurts the poor people more than anything else. By trying to give these dribs and drabs, we're actually creating a bigger problem down the road because it's just more months of people being evicted. We need an answer to this. We need a solution. And they're not trying to give us one. They're trying to give us distractions. They're trying to provide people to distract us completely. Because we need trolls out there to distract us. We need these made-up stories from the New York Times to distract us, to make us afraid. Aren't you afraid that there might be martial law, even though we have no way of proving that, even though we have no way that even came up in a conversation because we weren't part of it? And don't worry, we have other news media that will tell you the same thing, that it came up because even though CNN says it wasn't clear whether Trump endorsed the idea, because they weren't even in there. This isn't even the article from CNN. This is the New York Times article. CNN had no idea. But you're supposed to be afraid. You're supposed to be terrified. And Mavis, you're right. People do need a history lesson on what happened in Germany. But we're not being taught those history lessons. Instead, we're being told in history. Instead, what we're being told is identity politics. White people are evil and everyone else is good. And you have to take away from the evil people to give to everyone else. That's what history has become. And that's sad because it misses everything. And we know, as it's always been said, the more that we don't pay attention to history, the more that history repeats itself. It's a terrifying loop. And I did want to mention that we even see people like at Reason who are saying, hey, the whole thing about Section 230, don't even talk about it. Don't worry about it. Section 230 is perfect as it is. Because Facebook, don't be angry about a little moderation by Facebook. Just because they may shut down things, like they are denying people from being able to see this conversation, from joining in this live stream. Don't worry about that. Just because it's a little bit of free speech that's being totally denied on the basis of partisan political preferences, don't worry. It's okay. Because if you don't do that, it'll be worse. So just ignore it. It's terrifying, folks. I am troubled by this. And by the way, if you disagree, that's perfectly fine. I would advise, don't be like Lola as a troll, but actually just say your thoughts. Actually convey a reason. Maybe there's something that we're missing. Have I misunderstood something? Is there something about what we've been talking about today that isn't clear? That somehow we're wrong? I mean, is it perfectly okay, and is it necessary that we have to allow Facebook to completely block this conversation and to censor people because, it's okay to suppress online speech? Is that all right? If you think that's okay, if you think that's a good thing, if you think that's positive, please explain to me how. I do want to hear that answer. I want to hear people tell me how that's the case. If you think it's perfectly okay for the New York Times to tell you that something is a fact based on secondhand information, hearsay, and tell you that it's true, it's a fact, it's absolutely happening, but it's hearsay, then please explain to me, why should I value that? If you want to tell me that it's perfectly okay that we have seen COVID cause less deaths than overdoses because the cure is more deadly than the cause, and you think I'm wrong, if you think it's okay to have 621 overdoses killing people versus 173 from coronavirus, and you think that's a proper trade-off, you think that's in the best interest of the public, please explain that to me. If you think that domestic abuse rising by over 30% is a fair trade-off for locking people in their homes because 97% who get coronavirus will survive it because COVID-19 isn't the deadliest killing thing that we've ever seen, if you think I'm wrong, please explain it to me. Tell me why domestic abuse is more preferable than people surviving coronavirus. Please explain that to me. If you think that the fact that young adults and racial and ethnic minorities, essential workers, and unpaid adult caregivers are perfectly okay, it's perfectly okay that they are getting worse, that they are having mental health breakdowns, and that they are going towards substance abuse and suicide. If you think that's worth it, if you think that's a good thing, and that is the proper response to COVID-19, please explain that to me. I want to hear that answer. I want to understand why 81,000 people dying from an overdose is worth it when 97% of people who get COVID will survive. Please explain this to me. If you think it's perfectly okay that West Palm Beach is able to punish students, our future, they're okay to punish our country because their mayor has a different political belief, then please explain that to me. I want to understand. Because I don't understand. And you don't have to worry about the fact that there's only about 10 minutes left in the show, because you can still call in 607-242-1582, but you can also leave a comment on Facebook, because I am going to post the video afterwards on Facebook, or you can go on to YouTube, and you can go on to Twitter, and you can leave your comments, and please explain it to us, because it doesn't make sense. And I understand that trolls are terrified right now because they can't deal with facts being given out to the public. They can't stand that someone is actually following and paying attention to the details and giving you, the public, the details. Mavis says they don't actually care about people dying. It's just something to make Trump look bad. And yes, I agree. They are very much obsessed with the idea of Orange Man bad. But that is moving into a new phase, because it's not just Orange Man bad. It's also Republicans, conservatives, anyone who is not a dyed-in-the-wool progressive or socialist must be forced to conform. That's what they're trying to do. Yes, the trolls love. I don't know what the trolls are going to do when Orange Man bad is gone, and all they have left is the poor performance, the mental deterioration of Joe Biden. I don't know what they think they're going to do. They're going to lose their minds, because they're going to lose even more relevance than the little relevance that they have right now. That's it. And who cares if all elected officials are egomaniacs? Have you talked to any of them? I have, for 15 years. They're all egomaniacs. That's why they're in politics. But, these are really serious issues, folks. And they upset me. And I think they upset most of you. And I don't think, whether or not you happen to be a Democrat or a Republican, a Libertarian, a conservative, non-political, this is affecting us all. And I think we all are upset because we're all Americans first. And that's the most important thing. We're Americans. We live under these rules from the Constitution. Actually, we have our rights by birth. And we have a government that is held in check because we have these rights that are given to us by birth, which is why millions of people are trying to come to America as opposed to being everywhere else. Because if socialism was such a great idea, if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her squad were so right, and Bernie Sanders was so correct, and socialism was such a great idea, we wouldn't have people from those countries coming to America to live a better life. It tells you something. On average, there's about 20,000 people who leave America every year and say they don't want to be Americans. There's roughly over 2 million people legally trying to get into America every year, plus another, it's estimated somewhere between 5 to 10 million people who are trying to get to America every year illegally. Because we're great. We're a great nation. Because having freedom is a good thing. And it's in your best interest. And the more that we allow Facebook to go out there and say, hey, we're going to censor you and we're going to block you. The more we allow Twitter to say you can't say those things and they block you. The more we allow Google and YouTube to say, oh, you talked about this, we're going to just remove it. And if you complain about it, we'll just remove you. The more that we hear that, the more we have to be worried that we're losing the very thing that makes us the greatest country in the world. The reason why millions and millions of people are trying to get here every year. Because freedom is a good thing. Having freedom is a great thing. Being able to live based on what you believe personally is a good thing. And being some kind of automaton that is the same as any other automaton of the same gender and skin color is a bad thing. It just is. And I don't have to look very far to see that. Look at Venezuela. Look at Cuba, China, Russia. Look at all the socialist nations in the world. They all prove this every day. Look at Peru and how it's improved the moment it got rid of it. And all the places that get rid of socialism, like Peru, they always improve when they get rid of the socialism. But socialism is like one of the worst diseases ever known to man, because socialism always tells you, oh, but it could be better. We could make you more free. You could be more of everything. All you have to do is just give up everything. And if you give up everything, if you lock yourself in a house, you know what's going to happen? You're going to see more people dying. Just like the CDC has already said. You're going to see more stories made up about whomever they want to target. More of the propaganda saying that, anyone who disagrees is bad, even though there's no proof of that. But they said so it must be true. And they're going to prop up false heroes to make you believe, see how great the world is. She didn't even do anything. She did nothing. And we're going to celebrate her at the Hall of Fame like she's some kind of special person. Because everyone's special. All those little snowflakes are individual. Except they're not individual. They're just snowflakes. And they're interchangeable. Because that's what we hear from the socialists. You're interchangeable. It's not you. It's whatever your gender is. It's whatever your skin color is. Mavis mentions, I want to see a caravan of leftists leaving the U.S. They're never going to leave. They'll promise, they'll threaten it. What did Whoopi Goldberg said in the first election in 2016, that if Trump wins, she was going to leave? She didn't go anywhere. You know why? Because she was never going to make as much money anywhere else in the world. She would never be able to live as free and as well as she did in the United States. And that's true of every single one of those, all of the leftists, all of the progressives, all of them. They know this. They're not going anywhere because it doesn't get better than here. Rosie O'Donnell didn't go anywhere. Why didn't she go anywhere? Because America is better for her. She is more free than anywhere else in the world. Where she want to go? Iran? They'll stone her to death. Where she want to go? Cuba? She'll never have the ability to have the same quality of life as here. She wants to go to Venezuela. Venezuela, according to the New York Times itself, has told us that over 5,000 people have been killed by the Venezuelan government. They're killing their own people. Where are you going? Name the socialist state that's going to let you live a better life than you do in America. It doesn't exist. And we're losing our greatness. We're losing our nation piece by piece because people like Joe Biden, people like Kamala Harris, people like the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes of the world are out there trying to sell people on this idea that all you have to do is give up a little bit of your freedom, just a little bit more, and everything will be great. And it won't, because it never is. You know what? But I've said a lot here today, and I hope that you found it of interest. Hopefully you'll want to come back. I know the trolls will come back because they have nothing else to do, but I want you to come back if you've enjoyed this. Please like and also subscribe. We're looking to hit 500 subscribers by the end of the year. We're only about 10 subscribers away. We hope you can be part of that. And so like this, subscribe, share, because we're here for you every week, Sunday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Always talking with you, always listening to your voices. With that said, I want to thank everyone. I hope everyone's had a great Hanukkah. And for those that Christmas is coming up, I hope you're going to have a great Christmas. Because next week will be after Christmas. We will be here on the 27th. We want you to be well. We want you to be safe. And I look forward to all of your comments. Thank you, everyone.